This is my alternate assessment presentation. I chose to do a portfolio assessment. Um, Basically, the portfolio is a collection of student work, and it emphasizes student choice with the work they wish to present. Essentially, students will be able to choose what work they want to put in their portfolio that they think best represents what they've learned and what they've done in the class. This creates an atmosphere of self-reflection as students are able to look back on their previous assignments and reflect on what they have done. Through this process, the teacher acts as a guide to encourage and facilitate self-reflection in the classroom. The research actually supports portfolios a ton. Fraser and Paulson in 1992 stated that portfolios are a source of motivation for students. Essentially, as students choose what they want to include in the portfolio, it's a motivating thing that drives their learning as they are reflecting and assessing themselves on what they have done. McDonald 2012 said that traditional assessment was unreliable and unauthentic. Thinking of an example of this, I always think of a standardized test that's just multiple choice questions, something like the ACT or SAT, or even some summative assessments that are given in class. These often don't allow students to prepare for the assessment, and it doesn't really give a good gauge of what they actually know and can apply. So the sense of control in the learning process is increased through shared responsibility and involvement in assessment. This was Zimmerman in 1989. As students take control of their own learning, they begin to foster a sense of responsibility, and by being involved in the assessment, they are much more engaged and much more willing to learn from their previous work. Portfolios also enable continuous feedback for students. The interesting thing is the feedback doesn't always have to come from the teacher, but through the portfolio process and the self-reflection process, the feedback can actually come from the students themselves. Some standards that this addresses, the portfolio actually assesses a variety of standards because it is student-led and because of the variety of work that can be included. In a language arts classroom, it can assess writing and reading standards, and it can also assess speaking and listening standards depending on the previous assignments and the previous assessments within the class. So the portfolio for the assessment of content, the portfolio can really assess any level of student work. It can be varied and specified to allow students to present work in each content area. So for a language arts classroom, I gave the example of for the portfolio, I want you to choose one sample of your writing. This allows the teacher to assess the writing to the standards. But in a science classroom, the teacher could say, I want you to present, let's go with a chemistry classroom, one example of a equation that you solved, or something of that nature. Or a biology class could present one model you made that best shows your work in this class. So for the assessment of language, the portfolio allows for the assessment of each language domain: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. In a language arts classroom, reading and writing are probably assume that they will be assessed in the portfolio, but speaking and listening can also be assessed as you could work with partners, do some partner work with the portfolio, some sharing out, even a presentation with the class, just sharing out your portfolio and what you've learned throughout the process. So one example of this I gave is a personal example. It's a research paper that I wrote in one of my first writing classes in college. It goes over a Middle Eastern adaptation of Hamlet. So 3 things that I was proud of. I was really proud of all of the research and time I put into it. I was also really proud that I created a plan for this research project and was able to complete the entire thing. And then it was also the longest paper I wrote at the time. And I was really proud that I was able to complete such a large body of work. Two things I would change. I thought the essay itself was like a little choppy and didn't flow very well. So I would like to change that. And I think the way I researched and wrote the project was in sections, or the research itself was choppy in itself. So I would research and write, and I think that also contributed to the choppy nature of the paper. So I would also change how I researched the project. Something I learned during this process was no matter what type of plan you have going into something, that plan is bound to change at least a little bit in some way. And the biggest thing is how you adapt and overcome those challenges and complete the project. Here are some of the references I used. Thank you for watching.